Hey, and there I go live, and as Lynette just walks through the back. Okay, so brunch with Brian. So today is actually National Positive Thinking Day. So I want you to think about positive thinking, and that's the old thing. They used to talk about this a lot more. PMA. I used to hear this all the time in the 80s, 70s, and 80s was PMA. Hey,
PMA.
positive mental attitude.
Yes, awesome. Good
That's it.
morning.
Lynette's very good at maintaining a positive mental attitude. She never really dwells on anything or, doesn't really get in bad moods. So she's terrific on that.
PMA.
PMA, positive mental attitude. Lynette's an awesome role model for that, for all of us. And so, one of the things that we can slip into is some negative thinking. So I want you to guard against this and write this down. There's three things I want you to not do. When you want to keep positive, you don't want to complain, criticize, or compare. So write down the three C's: complain, criticize, compare. So anytime you fall into those C traps, you're going to have a problem. Because if you start complaining, are you keeping a positive mental attitude? In fact, here's my tip on that. Replace. Sometimes, it's hard to give up something, but it's easier to replace it. If you just give it up, that there's like a void. There's a big gaping hole there of something you gave up. So you got to really replace things. So instead of anytime you find yourself complaining today or anytime, try to switch it over to a compliment. There's always something you can compliment, no matter where you are or who you're with. There's always something you could compliment about the other person, about the way they are dressed or the way they look. Those are always easy compliments, especially if someone took extra care on something. So complimenting is such a perfect counter counter offer, whatever, to complaining. So instead of complaining, we're going to compliment. Now, the other thing that we can get in trouble with is criticizing. That's hard. It's easy to do because, especially if you're like me and you're kind of perfectionistic, that's the sort of the way you go around. You're kind of going around looking for the flaws. And here's the thing, it's a good thing to be a fixer in your mind. But sometimes that fixer mentality that I got from my dad, being an engineer, makes you always look for flaws, makes you look for things to criticize, makes you sort of a critic. And so you have to really guard against that. And so, again, I think, count your blessings is what I like to do there. Count your blessings. So instead of criticizing, count your blessings. Comparing. Comparing is where I like to count my blessings. Criticizing, and I use complimenting for that. So you got three things: complain, criticize, compare. So instead of complaining, what are we going to do? We're going to compliment people, okay? Instead of criticizing, we're going to also compliment people or compliment the situations. And then in terms of, I always count my blessings. If I find myself comparing, and everybody kind of does that, it's sort of how, well, you're put in situations where you're automatically compared, like in school. You go in school and everybody gets A's, B's, and C's or whatever, and you kind of compare yourself. Well, what did Bobby and Sally get? Did they get a B or a C, and what did I get? And you sort of kind of compare to sort of figure out where you're at and figure out what you're good at. So you sort of have to compare to sort of figure some things out. Like if you want to be a professional baseball player, and then you go out there and you compare yourself to other players, and there's a lot of players better than you, and you're on a T-ball team, then your chances are not so good. Okay, so let's just focus on complimenting and counting our blessings today, and that will help you keep in a positive mental attitude. The thing is, and guys, I love affirmations. So affirmations is, my favorite way to stay in a positive mental state. So anytime, one of my favorites, and I mentioned it yesterday, because I am a perfectionist, is my life is imperfect. But remember, and sometimes I say ain't, that's why I hesitate. My life ain't perfect, but it's pretty darn good, or sometimes pretty darn great. I try to say great. It's pretty darn great. And it could always be worse. Guys, everything could always be worse. So if you're complaining, just think, it could be worse. And count your blessings. So if you start saying, oh, I don't like this or that about my life. Well, of course that's good because hopefully it motivates you to change things. So, if you're sitting around complaining, you should be really looking at what you can improve. So be constructive, about it instead of just complaining about things. What could you do to be constructive to remedy that situation? What's something that you complain about all the time? I'm telling you, identify the things that you complain about over and over again. Okay, and a lot of those things can actually be fixed. There was something about our car. One of our cars, every time you start driving, the doors would lock. Okay, and then somehow this thing wasn't set up. So then when you stopped and put it into park, the driver door would unlock, but the other doors wouldn't unlock. So I always went to open my door and it would always be locked, and I would always complain, why does this thing always lock? And I always have to remember this. Okay. So is that a situation that could be remedied instead of complaining about it all the time? How many? Yes, because you can program the car differently to open up all the locks, or you could, figure out some other method. So look at the things that you complain about, constantly, and really try to address those. What's the underlying cause of the complaining? And if it's complaining about something like in your marriage or your relationship, then it's time to reset expectations. So if it's a constant complaint, something has to be. It always comes back to expectations. You expect something. Why are you complaining? Because you expected this and you got this. Okay, that's why you're complaining. Now, if you expected this and you got this, you're not complaining. You're complimenting. Okay, so either you lower your expectations or be aware of your expectations. Sometimes you're not even aware. Oh, I expect my wife to always have my breakfast on the table when I get up, or whatever. And if it's not there, I'm going to complain. Okay, so do you know that the other person might not even know that that's your expectation? And you'd think they'd be able to gather it if you complain about it over and over again, but maybe they're not thinking, how can we address the underlying issue here to resolve these complaints so that they don't keep happening. So what's the assignment for today is to try to write down any complaint. This is going to be good. Anytime you complain today, I want you to actually physically write it out. Get a piece of paper or open a little computer file and title it Complaints and Criticisms. And if you want to put the comparing in there too. Complaints, criticisms, and comparing. And then anytime you do it, if you criticize somebody or you say a complaint out loud, I want you to put it in there, okay? Also, same thing with criticizing, complaints, or comparing. So if you keep comparing yourself to one person over and over again in one issue. Now that's the other thing, guys. Remember, when you're doing that comparing game, which can be really destructive, but anybody who's competitive sort of does that, and it's kind of built into the brain. So that can be a tricky one to overcome. But when you compare, I want you to, I'm going to talk more about this on another day, but I want you to have sort of a core little prayer for yourself that you say that keeps you confident within yourself, so that when you start comparing yourself, you say, well, I'm a child of God, and I'm a good person. And so you feel okay about yourself, because that's where a lot of the problems come from, is insecurity. So if you look at the two underlying issues of every problem, it's expectations and insecurities. People make bad decisions based on their insecurities, and they take actions and say things based on their insecurities that don't turn out well. And a lot of those are revolving around complaining, criticizing, and comparing. So let's look at all those things today. Write them down. If you notice yourself doing it, write down what you're doing, and then think of a way that you could either turn that into counting your blessings, which I love doing, or complimenting others. I just saw something on some show, the daytime Emmys, and one of these winners, not the daytime, the regular Emmys, and it happened last night. So one of the winners comes on and she says, oh, I just try to stay positive and think about positive things. And you think, oh, wow, this is some big, huge star and everything. But they should be happy all the time, right? But that's not the way we're built. So let's take control of our minds today and veer as much as we can away from comparing, criticizing, and complaining. Okay? All right, I went over 10 minutes. Now I'm going to criticize myself. Darn it, I went over 10 minutes. I had a lot to talk about today. So I will not compare. Okay, let's do that. Let's just say I won't complain, criticize, or compare. Okay, that's our simple affirmation. I won't complain, criticize, or compare. Ready? 1, 2, 3. I won't complain, criticize, or compare. I won't complain, criticize, or compare. I won't complain, criticize, or compare. That's good. Now, if you can get away from those 3 C's, it's amazing how much more positive your life is. And if you really look at how much of your negative mental attitude, and remember today is National Positive Mental Attitude Day, a lot of it comes from those 3 sources. And so if you can stay clear of those, you're going to be in a lot more positive mental state. Hi everybody. Hi David. Good to see you. Robert. Going to see you later. Michael. Live for the Lord. Hi. Great to see you and everybody. So thanks for commenting. If you comment on Facebook, I will maybe respond to your comments. So, but we'll see you. Oops, we forgot to do our deep breathing. Nice deep breath in. Feels great. And take a deep breath and big smile. This is the way to start your day, right? Every day. Awesome. Great day. I will see you Thursday. Until then, keep expecting success, getting awesome training.